Have you ever looked into the eyes of someone you love more than life itself and realized they were plotting your complete destruction? I mean, truly plotting to take everything from you, your business, your reputation, your dignity, and your future, all while smiling to your face and calling you family? Because that's exactly what happened to me. And the day I stood in that courtroom, watching the judge lean forward with a single question that would unravel their entire scheme, I finally understood that sometimes the people who share your blood are the ones holding the knife aimed straight at your back. My name doesn't matter right now, but my story does, because what I'm about to share with you changed everything I thought I knew about loyalty, family, and the lengths people will go to when jealousy consumes them. This isn't just another story about betrayal. This is about how one moment, one question from a judge who saw through the lies, destroyed the very people who tried to destroy me first. And I need you to stay with me through every single moment of this journey, because the truth is stranger and more devastating than anything you could imagine. I remember the exact moment when my world felt perfect. It was a Tuesday morning in late spring, the kind of day when the sun hits everything just right and you feel like you're exactly where you're supposed to be in life. I was sitting in my office, looking at the quarterly reports that showed my business had grown by 43% in just 6 months. 43%. I had built this company from absolutely nothing. Started in my garage with borrowed money and a dream that everyone told me was too ambitious, too risky, too everything. But there I was 5 years later with 72 employees, 3 office locations, and contracts with some of the biggest clients in the industry. My hands were literally shaking as I held those papers, not from fear but from pure, unfiltered joy. I had made it. Against every odd, against every person who doubted me, I had actually made it. And the first people I wanted to share this victory with were my family, my brother Marcus, my sister Elena, and my uncle Robert. They were my blood, my support system, the people who had been there through the late nights and the early struggles, or so I thought. I can still remember picking up the phone that morning, my fingers trembling with excitement as I dialed Marcus's number first. He was always the one I turned to when good things happened, the big brother who had taught me how to ride a bike, who had stood up for me in high school when bullies targeted me, who had been my best man at my wedding before my divorce. I thought we had the kind of bond that nothing could break. Looking back now, I can see how naive I was, how blindly I trusted, how desperately I wanted to believe that the people who shared my DNA would celebrate my success instead of resenting it. That morning, when I called Marcus to tell him about the numbers, his response should have been my first red flag. There was this pause, this pregnant silence that lasted just a fraction too long before he said, "That's great, really great," in a tone that sounded like someone congratulating their enemy. But I brushed it off. I told myself he was just having a bad day, that maybe his own business ventures weren't going as well, that I was being paranoid. God, if I could go back and shake that version of myself, I would. If I could scream into my own ears to pay attention, to trust my instincts, to protect what I had built before it was too late, maybe everything would have turned out differently. But hindsight is a cruel teacher, isn't it? It gives you all the answers after the test is over, after the damage is done, after your whole world has been set on fire by the people you trusted most. I spent weeks trying to rationalize that phone call, telling myself I was reading too much into a simple tone of voice. I even called Elena the next day to gauge her reaction, and she seemed genuinely happy for me, asking all the right questions about growth projections and future plans. At the time, I thought her enthusiasm was sincere. Now I know she was gathering intelligence, collecting information they would later twist and weaponize against me. The thing about building a successful business is that it doesn't just change your bank account. It changes the way people look at you, talk to you, relate to you. Suddenly, family dinners became weird interrogations about my finances. How much are you really making? What's your profit margin? Have you thought about bringing family into the business more formally? That last question came from Uncle Robert during a Sunday barbecue at my mother's house, and I remember feeling excited about it. Excited. I thought he was showing genuine interest, that maybe he wanted to be more involved to help me grow even further. Uncle Robert had always been the family entrepreneur, the one who had owned several small businesses throughout his life. Some succeeded, some failed, but he was always hustling, always looking for the next opportunity. I respected that about him. I actually considered creating positions for them, giving them stakes in something I had bled and cried and sacrificed for. My girlfriend at the time, Sarah, warned me. She said, Be careful mixing family and business. People change when money's involved. I laughed it off. I told her she was being cynical, that my family wasn't like that blood was thicker than water, and all those other stupid cliches we tell ourselves before life teaches us the hard truth. Sarah and I broke up 3 months later, not because of family issues, but because I was so consumed with work that I neglected our relationship. Looking back, I wish I had listened to her warnings. She saw something I was too blind to see, too emotionally invested to acknowledge. Over the next few months, things started happening that I couldn't quite explain. Small things at first. A client would suddenly back out of a deal, citing concerns they'd heard about my company's stability. These were clients I had worked with for years, relationships I thought were solid. When I asked what concerns they'd heard, they were vague, mentioning rumors circulating in the industry about financial mismanagement. I'd lose bids I should have won easily, bids where we were clearly the most qualified, most experienced option. The rejection emails were always polite but contained subtle hints that decision-makers had reservations about our long-term viability. Rumors started circulating in the industry that I was mismanaging funds, that my success was built on lies and inflated numbers, that I was on the verge of bankruptcy. None of it was true. Not a single word. My books were clean, my business practices were ethical, and my growth was legitimate and sustainable. I had quarterly audits done by a reputable accounting firm. I had zero debt beyond a small business loan that was being paid off ahead of schedule. But the rumors kept spreading like poison, seeping into every conversation, every business meeting, every networking event. I started losing sleep, spending nights trying to figure out where these lies were coming from. Who would want to damage my reputation like this? I hired a reputation management firm that specialized in corporate damage control. They monitored online forums, industry groups, and social media platforms, trying to identify the source of the misinformation. I had my lawyer send cease and desist letters to industry forums where anonymous accounts were posting false information about my company. Nothing worked. The damage was being done faster than I could repair it, and I felt like I was drowning in quicksand, struggling against an invisible enemy I couldn't identify or fight. My anxiety reached levels I had never experienced before. I started having panic attacks in the middle of the night, waking up drenched in sweat, my heart racing as I imagined losing everything I had built. Then came the day that changed everything. It was a Thursday afternoon in October, the kind of gray, rainy day that matches the mood of bad news. I was in a meeting with one of my biggest clients, trying to salvage a relationship that had grown tense due to the rumors. We were discussing renewal terms when my assistant knocked on the door with an expression of pure panic. Her face was pale, her hands were shaking, and I knew immediately that something terrible had happened. She handed me a document, and as I read the first few lines, I felt my heart literally stop beating for a moment. The words on the page didn't make sense at first. My brain refused to process what my eyes were seeing. It was a lawsuit, a massive lawsuit filed by Marcus, Elena, and Robert. My own brother, my own sister, my own uncle. They were suing me for fraud, embezzlement, breach of contract, misappropriation of intellectual property, and about 15 other things I couldn't even process in that moment. They claimed I had promised them partnership stakes in the company years ago, that I had stolen their ideas and investments, that I had built my success on their backs and then cut them out maliciously. The complaint was over 60 pages long, filled with detailed accusations that painted me as a master manipulator who had used family relationships to exploit people who trusted me. Every single word was a lie. Every accusation was fabricated. But there it was, in legal language, in a formal complaint filed with the court, seeking not just monetary damages, but the complete dissolution of my company and the seizure of all my assets. They were asking for $12 million in damages plus punitive damages plus legal fees. They wanted the court to appoint a receiver to take over my business and sell it off piece by piece. They weren't just trying to hurt me financially. They were trying to destroy me publicly, to humiliate me, to take everything I had built and tear it down piece by piece while the whole world watched. I couldn't breathe. I literally couldn't catch my breath. The client I was meeting with was asking if I was okay, his voice sounding distant and muffled like I was underwater. My assistant was hovering in the doorway looking terrified, probably wondering if she should call for medical help. And all I could think was how. How could they do this? What had I done to deserve this level of betrayal? The memories started flooding back, overwhelming me with their cruelty. I had helped Marcus when his first business failed 5 years ago, giving him $15,000 that I couldn't really afford at the time because I was still building my own company. I never asked for it back. I had paid for Elena's entire wedding when she was struggling financially, a $30,000 affair because she wanted everything to be perfect. I told her it was my gift as her brother, that family takes care of family. I had given Robert a loan of $25,000 when he was facing foreclosure on his house, and I explicitly told him to pay me back whenever he could. No pressure, no interest. He never paid back a single dollar, and I never brought it up because I didn't want to make him feel bad. And this was how they repaid me? By conspiring together, by creating an elaborate fiction designed to ruin me? The document in my hands felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds. I excused myself from the meeting, barely able to form coherent words as I apologized to my client. I went to my office, locked the door, closed the blinds, and for the first time since I was a child, I broke down completely. I'm talking ugly crying. The kind where you can't control your breathing and your whole body shakes. Because it wasn't just about the lawsuit or the money or even the business. It was the realization that the people I loved most in this world, the people I would have given everything for, saw me as nothing more than a target, an obstacle, something to be eliminated. The betrayal was so profound, so complete, that it felt like a physical pain in my chest. I actually wondered if I was having a heart attack. That's how intense the emotional agony was. The next few weeks were a blur of legal meetings, document gathering, and desperate attempts to understand their strategy. My lawyer, a sharp woman named Patricia Chen, who had been in the business for 30 years, read through their complaint and actually laughed. Not a happy laugh, but one of those bitter, incredulous sounds you make when something is so absurd, you don't know how else to react. "This is the sloppiest fraud I've ever seen," she said, tapping the papers with her pen, her reading glasses perched on her nose as she scanned through the allegations. "They've fabricated conversations, forged signatures, and made claims that can be disproven with your company's basic records. The question isn't whether we can beat this, it's why they thought they could get away with it." That question haunted me for weeks. Why did they think this would work? Were they that desperate? That delusional? Had they convinced themselves that their lies were truth? Or did they know something I didn't? Was there some angle I wasn't seeing? Some weakness they had identified that Patricia and I had missed? The paranoia started eating at me from the inside. I stopped sleeping more than 3 hours a night. I lost 15 pounds in 2 weeks because food tasted like cardboard, and my stomach was constantly in knots. I couldn't focus on work because every spare moment was consumed by this nightmare my own family had created. I would sit in meetings and realize I hadn't heard a single word anyone had said for the past 10 minutes because I was replaying family memories in my head, trying to identify the moment when love turned to hatred, when jealousy became so consuming that destroying me seemed like a reasonable course of action. The worst part wasn't even the legal battle. It was the social destruction they were orchestrating alongside it. They went on social media, Marcus especially, posting long emotional messages about how I had betrayed the family, how I had promised them the world, and then stolen their dreams. His posts were masterfully written, designed to generate maximum sympathy and paint me as a villain. He shared old photos of us together from childhood, from family vacations, from holidays with captions like, "He used to be my hero, now I don't even know him," and "Greed changes people in the worst ways." The photos were strategic too. Pictures where I was clearly better dressed or in nicer settings, making it look like I had abandoned my roots and become some kind of elitist who forgot where he came from. People I hadn't spoken to in years were reaching out with messages of support for them, telling me I should be ashamed, that family should come first, that money and success had corrupted me. Distant cousins, old high school friends, neighbors from my childhood, all of them suddenly had opinions about my character based on Marcus's carefully crafted narrative. My business partners started getting nervous calls from their own investors asking about the lawsuit. Some of my employees began questioning whether they should look for other jobs, worried that the company might not survive the legal battle. Clients were putting contracts on hold, waiting to see how the lawsuit resolved before committing further. Some terminated existing contracts using vague legal language about material changes in business circumstances. They were destroying me systematically, using every tool at their disposal, legal, social, professional, and I felt completely powerless to stop it. Have you ever felt that kind of helplessness? That sensation of watching your entire life crumble while you're screaming but no sound comes out? That's where I was. That's the pit of despair they threw me into, and they were standing at the edge laughing while I tried to climb out with bleeding hands and shattered hope. But here's the thing about being pushed to your absolute limit. You either break completely or you find a strength you never knew you had. I chose the latter. There was a specific moment when the switch flipped in my mind. I was sitting in my apartment at 3 a.m, unable to sleep again, scrolling through Marcus's social media posts and feeling sorry for myself. And suddenly I just got angry. Not the hot, explosive anger that makes you do stupid things, but the cold, calculated anger that sharpens your focus and hardens your resolve. I realized that by wallowing in self-pity and despair, I was giving them exactly what they wanted. They wanted me broken, defeated, too weak to fight back effectively. So I stopped crying. I stopped panicking. I got methodical and strategic. Patricia and I spent 3 solid weeks going through every single document related to my business from the day I started it. Bank statements going back 7 years. Emails from the company's entire history. Contracts, receipts, text messages, everything. We built a timeline that proved beyond any shadow of doubt that their claims were fiction. We found messages where Marcus had asked for loans and I had given them freely with no expectation of partnership or repayment. The text messages were still on my phone, clear as day. We found emails where Elena had explicitly declined opportunities to invest when I offered her a chance to buy into the company at a discounted rate during the early days. She had written back saying she wasn't interested in taking that kind of risk, that she preferred to keep her money in safer investments. We found documents showing that Uncle Robert had never contributed a single dollar to the business despite his claims of substantial investment. Every wire transfer, every check, every cash deposit into the company account was documented and traceable, and none of it came from him. The evidence was overwhelming. But Patricia warned me that evidence wasn't always enough. Juries are unpredictable, she said during one of our late-night strategy sessions. Judges can be swayed by emotion, especially when family dynamics are involved. People want to believe that families don't destroy each other like this. They want to believe in reconciliation and forgiveness. We need to be prepared for anything. So we prepared for war. We hired private investigators who discovered that Marcus, Elena, and Robert had been meeting secretly for 6 months before filing the lawsuit, planning their strategy, coordinating their stories, rehearsing their lies. The investigators found credit card receipts from restaurants where the 3 of them had met dozens of times, always without me, always at odd hours like they were trying to avoid being seen together. We found financial records showing they had hired their own investigators to dig up dirt on me months before filing suit. Those investigators had come up empty because there was no dirt to find. My life was boring and ethical. I paid my taxes, followed all business regulations, treated employees fairly, and ran a clean operation. Everything they were doing was premeditated, calculated, and evil. This wasn't a spontaneous family dispute that got out of hand. This was a coordinated campaign of destruction that they had planned carefully and executed ruthlessly. The day of the preliminary hearing arrived faster than I wanted it to. I woke up that morning with a sense of dread so heavy it felt like someone was sitting on my chest. I put on my best suit, a charcoal gray that Patricia had insisted I wear, because it looked professional and trustworthy without being flashy. I stared at myself in the mirror and barely recognized the person looking back. I had aged years in just a few weeks. There were dark circles under my eyes that no amount of sleep would fix. My face looked thinner, gaunt. I looked like someone who had been through war. In a way, I had been. I walked into that courtroom feeling like I was walking to my own execution. The building itself was imposing, all marble and wood paneling and the kind of formal atmosphere that makes you speak in whispers. The gallery was packed with people, journalists who had caught wind of the family drama and smelled a good story, business associates watching to see which way this would go and whether they should distance themselves from me, and of course them. Marcus sat on the plaintiff's side with his lawyer, a sharp-dressed woman who apparently specialized in family business disputes. He was wearing a suit I'm pretty sure I bought him for his birthday 2 years ago, a navy blue Hugo Boss that had cost me $800. The irony wasn't lost on me. Elena was dabbing her eyes with a tissue, playing the victim so convincingly that I almost believed she was hurt. She had always been dramatic even as a child, able to cry on command when she wanted something from our parents. Robert had this smug expression on his face like he had already won. Like this was all just a formality before they divided up my assets and bankrupted me. They didn't even look at me. Not once. It was like I was already dead to them, already erased from their lives except as a source of money they thought they deserved. The hatred in that room was palpable, thick enough to choke on. The judge, a stern older man named Judge Harrison, who had a reputation for being no-nonsense and extremely fair, entered the room and everyone stood. He was in his late 60s with gray hair and sharp eyes that seemed to see through any nonsense. As I sat back down, my hands were shaking so badly I had to clasp them together in my lap. Patricia squeezed my shoulder reassuringly, but I could feel the weight of the moment crushing down on me. This was it. This was where my fate would be decided. This was where I would either be vindicated or destroyed. Their lawyer went first and she was good. I have to give her that. She painted me as a manipulative monster who had used family connections and trust to build an empire, and then discarded everyone who helped me along the way. She made me sound like a calculating villain who had planned to betray my family from the beginning, who had seen them as nothing more than stepping stones to be used and discarded. She presented their fabricated documents with confidence, treating obvious forgeries as legitimate evidence. She called Marcus to the stand first, and he told story after story about how I had promised him partnership, how we had shaken hands on deals that I later reneged on, how I had laughed in his face when he asked for what was rightfully his. None of it happened. Not a single conversation he described had ever taken place, but he was convincing, and I could see some people in the gallery nodding along sympathetically. He had clearly rehearsed his testimony, hitting all the right emotional notes, pausing at key moments to collect himself as if the pain of betrayal was too much to bear. Elena went next, and her performance was even more dramatic. She cried about how I had exploited her marketing ideas without credit or compensation, how I had stolen her concepts and passed them off as my own. She claimed she had come up with the entire branding strategy that made my company successful, that she had worked on it for months and presented it to me as a gift, and that I had taken it and built an empire on her creativity without ever acknowledging her contribution. Again, complete lies. Elena had never worked in marketing a day in her life. She was a yoga instructor with no business experience whatsoever, but she sold it well, making herself look like a naive creative person who had been exploited by her ruthless businessman brother. Uncle Robert testified last, and he claimed to have made substantial cash investments in the early days, investments that had supposedly been made in private with handshake agreements because that's how family does business. He talked about how he had believed in me when no one else did, how he had risked his own financial security to help me get started, and how I had promised him a generous return on his investment that never materialized. The whole performance was Academy Award worthy, and I felt physically sick watching it unfold. These were people I had loved, people I had trusted, and they were sitting on a witness stand in front of a judge and a room full of people, telling elaborate lies designed to destroy me. Then it was our turn. Patricia stood up with a calmness that I envied and admired in equal measure. She didn't attack right away or try to match their emotional intensity. Instead, she methodically walked through the timeline of my business, showing incorporation documents that proved I was the sole founder with no partners or co-founders listed at any point in the company's history. She presented bank records that showed every dollar that went in and came out, with clear documentation showing that every investment came from my personal savings, documented loans from financial institutions, and later from legitimate investors who had signed proper contracts. She showed emails that contradicted every major claim they had made, messages where Elena declined investment opportunities, where Marcus thanked me for loans with no mention of partnership agreements, where Robert discussed purely personal matters with no connection to the business. She called me to the stand and I told the truth. Simple, plain, unembellished truth. Yes, I had helped my family financially over the years because that's what you do when you have the means and your family needs help. Yes, I had offered them opportunities to invest or participate that they had declined because they weren't interested in taking the risk or didn't believe the business would succeed. No, I had never made promises of partnership beyond those documented offers that they rejected. No, I had never stolen ideas or money. The truth wasn't dramatic or emotional. It was just honest and straightforward. And as I sat there answering Patricia's questions, I could see Marcus's face getting redder, his jaw clenching as the lies started to unravel. Elena's crying became more forced, less convincing. Robert's smugness started to crack, replaced by a nervousness that he couldn't quite hide. They knew what was coming. They could feel the house of cards starting to wobble, the foundation of their conspiracy crumbling under the weight of documented evidence and verifiable facts. But the moment that destroyed them, the single instant that brought their entire scheme crashing down in spectacular fashion, came when Judge Harrison stopped the proceedings and leaned forward with a question. The courtroom went completely silent. You could have heard a pin drop on the carpet. The tension in the room shifted instantly from a normal trial atmosphere to something electric and charged. He looked directly at Marcus with an intensity that made even me uncomfortable, and I wasn't the target. "Mr. Morrison," he said, his voice carrying authority that demanded attention. "You've claimed that your brother promised you a 25% stake in the company in exchange for your early support and advice. Is that correct?" Marcus nodded eagerly, sitting up straighter in his chair, probably thinking the judge was about to validate his lies and side with the plaintiffs. "Yes, Your Honor, that's absolutely correct. He promised me partnership from the very beginning." Judge Harrison flipped through some papers in front of him, taking his time, letting the silence build. Then he looked up with an expression I couldn't quite read, part skepticism, part something darker. "And this promise was made when, exactly?" Marcus stammered a bit, clearly not expecting to be questioned directly by the judge rather than just answering lawyers' questions. It was early on, maybe 5 years ago, right when he was starting out, when he was still working from his garage." The judge nodded slowly, deliberately, like a teacher who knows a student is lying and is giving them a chance to correct themselves. Then he said something that made my heart skip a beat and changed everything. "Mr. Morrison, I have in front of me the complete business registry for your brother's company. According to these public records, which are verified by the state and cannot be altered retroactively, your brother filed as a sole proprietorship with absolutely no partners or co-founders listed at any point in the company's entire history. Furthermore, I have bank statements subpoenaed by this court showing that every dollar invested in the business came from documented loans and your brother's personal savings, with detailed records of the sources of every deposit. Can you explain to me why there is no paper trail whatsoever of this alleged partnership agreement? No contracts, no emails discussing terms, no text messages confirming the arrangement, nothing. The silence that followed was deafening. Marcus opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again like a fish gasping for air. He looked at his lawyer, who was frantically flipping through documents trying to find an answer that didn't exist. Elena had stopped crying entirely, her tissue frozen halfway to her face. Robert's smugness had completely evaporated, replaced by pure fear as he realized where this was heading. Judge Harrison wasn't done. He was just getting started, and you could tell he was angry about having his time wasted with obvious lies. He turned to Elena next, his sharp eyes boring into her. "Ms. Morrison, you've claimed intellectual property theft regarding marketing concepts. You say your brother stole your ideas and built his brand on your creative work. Do you have any documentation of these concepts? Emails where you shared your ideas? Drafts with timestamps? Anything that would prove you created these ideas before your brother's company implemented them?" Elena stuttered through some weak excuse about keeping ideas in her head, about verbal discussions that were never documented because she trusted her brother and didn't think she needed proof within a family relationship. The judge's expression hardened into something almost contemptuous. "So you're asking this court to dissolve a multi-million-dollar company and award you substantial damages based on ideas you claim to have had but never wrote down, never shared in any verifiable way, and cannot prove existed before the accused company implemented similar strategies that, I might add after reviewing industry standards, are common practices in your brother's field? Strategies that appear in dozens of marketing textbooks and have been used by hundreds of companies long before." "Your brother started his business?" Elena didn't answer. She couldn't answer. There was no answer that wouldn't be an obvious lie. Then Judge Harrison turned to Robert, and his tone somehow got even colder. "And you, Mr. Morrison, claim to have invested substantial cash sums in the early days of the company. Can you provide bank withdrawal records showing where this money came from? Deposit receipts showing where it went? Any paper trail at all that would document these alleged investments?" Robert mumbled something about cash transactions, about keeping things off the books, about family trust being more important than paperwork. Judge Harrison actually laughed, a short, bitter sound that contained zero humor. "Mr. Morrison, this court deals in evidence, not feelings, not family dynamics, not he said, she said stories. You're claiming you invested tens of thousands of dollars in cash without a single piece of documentation? Without even a text message saying, "Hey, I'm giving you this money for the business"? Nothing? What happened next was something I'll remember for the rest of my life, burned into my memory with perfect clarity. Judge Harrison set down his pen, removed his glasses, and rubbed the bridge of his nose like he had a headache from dealing with such obvious nonsense. Then he said words that I had been desperate to hear but never thought would come. "I've been on the bench for 27 years, he began, his voice carrying to every corner of the courtroom, "and I've seen many cases of family disputes over business matters. I've seen legitimate disagreements, honest misunderstandings, and situations where everyone involved genuinely believed they were in the right. But I have rarely seen such a coordinated effort to commit fraud upon this court." He paused, letting his words sink in, letting the weight of that accusation fill the room. "The plaintiffs have presented fabricated documents, false testimony, and claims that are directly contradicted by public records and verifiable evidence. This isn't a case of misunderstanding or poor communication. This is an attempt to weaponize the legal system to extort money from a successful family member out of jealousy and greed." He paused again, and you could see anger building behind his controlled demeanor. "I'm not just dismissing this case with prejudice, meaning it cannot be refiled. I'm referring it to the district attorney for investigation of perjury, fraud upon the court, and conspiracy to commit fraud. Each of you should consult with your attorneys immediately about the criminal implications of what you've done here today." The gavel came down with a sharp crack that echoed through the courtroom like a gunshot, and it was over, just like that. Their entire scheme, all their planning and lying and manipulation, destroyed by a judge who did what judges are supposed to do, looked at the actual evidence instead of getting swept up in emotional manipulation. I sat there in stunned silence as chaos erupted around me. Their lawyer was arguing with the judge's clerk, trying to file some kind of emergency motion or request for reconsideration, her professional composure completely shattered. Marcus was shouting something about corruption and bias, his face red and twisted with rage, all pretense of being the wronged victim completely gone. Elena was genuinely crying now. Not the fake performance tears, but real fear and despair as she realized what criminal fraud charges could mean. Potential jail time, permanent criminal records, complete destruction of her reputation. Robert had his head in his hands, shaking it back and forth in disbelief or denial or both. Patricia was squeezing my shoulder and saying something about a complete victory, about countersuing for damages, about making them pay for what they tried to do. But I couldn't hear her properly over the roaring in my ears. Security guards escorted Marcus out when he wouldn't stop yelling, physically removing him from the courtroom while he screamed about injustice and family betrayal. Reporters were rushing toward me with microphones and cameras, shouting questions about how I felt, what I planned to do next, whether I would pursue criminal charges. And all I could think was, how did we get here? How did we go from being family, from shared birthday parties and holiday dinners and memories that I treasured, to this moment in this courtroom where a judge was threatening my own blood with criminal prosecution? When did their love for me turn into hate? When did my success become their enemy instead of something to celebrate together? Have you ever experienced that kind of confusion mixed with relief, mixed with devastating sadness all at once? Because that's where I was. I had won, yes, but what had I really won? The destruction of my family? The confirmation that the people I loved most in the world were capable of trying to ruin me completely? That's not victory. That's just a different kind of loss. A Pyrrhic triumph that tastes like ashes in your mouth. The aftermath was almost worse than the lawsuit itself in some ways. The story went viral within hours. Local news picked it up first, sending reporters to stake out my office and home. Then national media got interested because family betrayal stories always generate clicks and views. Within 48 hours, it was all over social media with hashtags and trending topics. Family members tried to bankrupt successful entrepreneur in shocking fraud case, read one headline. Judge destroys false lawsuit, with single question, read another. When blood isn't thicker than greed, said a third. My phone wouldn't stop ringing. Literally hundreds of calls and texts per day. I had interview requests from every major news outlet, from local stations to CNN to international media. Podcast invitations flooded my email. People wanted to option my story for movies or documentary series or books. Business partners who had been skeptical and distant during the lawsuit were now calling to apologize profusely and reaffirm their commitments, some even offering better terms than we had before. Clients came flooding back, many apologizing for doubting me and offering new contracts as a show of faith. My company's reputation was not just restored, but enhanced, because everyone loves a story about someone overcoming betrayal and standing up for truth against all odds. The underdog who wins despite overwhelming opposition. Within a month, my business had grown by another 30%. 6 months later, I had opened 2 more locations in different states and was negotiating international contracts with companies in Europe and Asia. From a purely professional standpoint, their attempt to destroy me had actually made me stronger and more successful than I had been before. The publicity, while painful personally, had given my company visibility I couldn't have bought with any marketing budget. But personally, emotionally, I was shattered in ways that success couldn't repair. I would lie awake at night replaying every family memory, trying to pinpoint when things changed, when jealousy planted its first seeds, when they decided I was no longer worthy of love but only of destruction. Was it gradual or sudden? Had they always been this way and I was too blind to see it? Or did my success genuinely transform them into people I didn't recognize? These questions haunted me because there were no satisfying answers. Understanding why someone betrays you doesn't make the betrayal hurt less. If anything, it makes it worse because you realize how premeditated it all was. The district attorney did pursue criminal charges with surprising vigor. Apparently, the case had made him look good politically, taking a stand against fraud and false accusations. Marcus and Elena took plea deals after their lawyers advised them that fighting would result in longer sentences. The deals involved probation, substantial community service hours, and full restitution for my legal fees, which had climbed into the hundreds of thousands. They also had to publicly retract their accusations in formal statements, which the media eagerly published. Robert fought it in court and lost badly, ending up with an 8-month jail sentence and a permanent criminal record that would follow him forever. Their lawyer lost her license for knowingly presenting fraudulent evidence and was publicly censured by the State Bar Association. The investigators they had hired to dig up dirt on me were fined heavily and had their business shut down by the state. Everyone who had participated in the conspiracy faced consequences, legal and social and professional. Their lives imploded in ways that, honestly, I never wanted to see happen. Because despite everything they did to me, despite the pain and betrayal and attempted destruction, they were still my family. That blood connection doesn't just disappear because someone hurts you. It gets twisted and complicated and painful, but it doesn't vanish. I found myself grieving for relationships that were still technically alive but effectively dead. Marcus moved to another state, somewhere in the Midwest where nobody knew our story. Elena changed her name legally and deleted all her social media accounts, essentially erasing her identity and starting over. Robert, after serving his time, became a complete recluse, living off disability payments and avoiding any contact with our extended family. We don't speak, we don't see each other. We don't see. The family gatherings that used to bring joy, Thanksgiving dinners, Christmas celebrations, summer barbecues, are now just painful memories of something that no longer exists and never will again. But here's what I learned through all of this, and I need you to really hear this because it's important and it might save you from similar pain. Success doesn't change you. It reveals who people around you really are. When I had nothing, when I was struggling and broke and desperate, working 18-hour days and barely scraping by, my family was supportive because I wasn't a threat. I was just their relative trying to make it, someone to feel sorry for or offer occasional help to. But the moment I succeeded beyond their own achievements, the moment my light shone brighter than theirs, they couldn't handle it. It wasn't about me changing or becoming arrogant or forgetting where I came from. I was the same person with the same values and the same heart. What changed was their perception of me as competition instead of family, as someone who had achieved what they couldn't and made them feel inadequate by comparison. And that's a problem that existed in them, not in me. I spent months in therapy working through this understanding, learning that I couldn't have prevented their jealousy or their choices. I could only control my response to it. And I chose to keep building, keep growing, keep succeeding, not out of spite or revenge, but because that's who I am at my core. That's what I'm meant to do. Their betrayal taught me to be more careful about who I trust. Yes, but it didn't make me bitter or closed off or afraid to be successful. I also learned the immense value of documentation and legal protection, lessons I now share with every entrepreneur I mentor. If I hadn't kept meticulous records from day one, if I hadn't had clear contracts and verified documents for every business transaction, their lies might have been much harder to disprove. Documentation saved me. I tell every entrepreneur I mentor now, and I'll tell you, protect yourself legally from day one, even from family, especially from family, because when money gets involved, people change in ways you never expect. Keep records of every conversation that matters, every transaction, no matter how small, every agreement, even if it seems unnecessary at the time. Don't assume that trust is enough. Trust without verification is just naive hope waiting to be exploited by anyone desperate or jealous enough. Create legal structures that protect your business regardless of personal relationships. Your company should be able to survive even if your closest relationships don't. That's not being cynical. That's being smart and learning from someone who almost lost everything because I trusted blindly instead of protecting wisely. There are moments now, even years later, when I'll see something that reminds me of the family we used to be and I feel this profound ache. A song that played at Elena's wedding will come on the radio. I'll drive past a restaurant where we celebrated Marcus's first business deal. I'll hear a joke that only Robert would laugh at in his specific way. And I feel this sadness, this grief for what's been lost. I won't lie and pretend I'm completely over it or that I've moved on without scars. The betrayal left wounds that healed, but left marks, changed me in ways both good and bad. I'm more cautious now, more guarded with my trust, slower to let people close to me, but I'm also stronger, more resilient, more certain of my own worth and capabilities. I don't need validation from people who share my DNA anymore. I've built my own chosen family, friends who've proven their loyalty through actions, not words, business partners who've stood by me through scandal and difficulty, a community that values integrity and truth above personal gain. These are the people I celebrate my victories with now. These are the people who get my time and energy and trust. The question I get asked most often when people hear my story is whether I've forgiven them. It's complicated, and I think that's okay. I've forgiven them in the sense that I don't actively wish them harm, and I've let go of the burning anger that consumed me in those early days after the lawsuit. But forgiveness doesn't mean reconciliation. It doesn't mean letting them back into my life or pretending what they did was okay or excusable. You can forgive someone for your own peace of mind while still maintaining boundaries that protect you from further harm. That's where I am. I've processed the pain through therapy and time. I've worked through the trauma of betrayal. I've made peace with the fact that the family I thought I had was an illusion built on assumptions that were never tested until money entered the equation. But I'm not reaching out. I'm not opening that door again. Maybe that makes me unforgiving in some people's eyes, but I prefer to think of it as being wise enough to learn from experience. They showed me who they really are when the stakes were high. I believed them, and I moved on to build a life that doesn't include people who tried to destroy me. My business continues to thrive beyond anything I imagined during those dark days of the lawsuit. We're now in 7 cities with over 200 employees and plans to expand internationally next year, with offices planned for London and Singapore. I've won multiple industry awards and been featured in major business publications as an example of resilience and ethical business practices. But more importantly than any award or recognition, I've built something that matters to me on a deep level, something that provides good jobs and opportunities for hundreds of people and their families, something that makes a positive impact in the world through both our business practices and our charitable initiatives. And I did it by staying true to my values even when it would have been easier to compromise them. Even when people I loved tried to tear me down for having those values. The people who tried to destroy me thought that tearing me down would somehow lift them up, that my failure would equal their success. They didn't understand that success isn't a zero-sum game where someone has to lose for someone else to win. My achievement didn't take anything away from their potential. Their own choices, their jealousy and hatred and willingness to lie and cheat, destroyed their own lives far more effectively than anything I could have done to them. Justice served itself through their own actions and the consequences they brought upon themselves. All I had to do was tell the truth and let the evidence speak. Sometimes the best revenge really is just living well and succeeding, despite those who try to stop you, proving through your continued success that their efforts to destroy you were futile and wrong. So let me ask you this, and I really want you to think about it and engage with this question. Have you ever had someone in your life, family, friend, partner, colleague, who tried to hold you back or tear you down because of your success or potential? Have you experienced that complicated pain of betrayal from someone you trusted completely? Comment below and share your story, even if it's just a few sentences. I read every single comment personally, and there's something incredibly powerful about knowing we're not alone in these experiences. Understanding that betrayal happens to many of us doesn't make it hurt less, but it does help us realize that the problem wasn't us. It was them and their inability to handle our success. It's crucial to understand that you cannot control how others respond to your success or achievements. You can only control how you protect yourself and keep moving forward, despite their negativity and sabotage. That's the lesson that saved me from complete destruction. That's the truth that rebuilt my life from the ashes of betrayal. And if you're going through something similar right now, if you're in that dark place where you feel betrayed and destroyed and hopeless about the future, I need you to know deep in your heart that you can survive this. You will survive this. You can come out stronger on the other side. You just have to hold on to the truth, protect yourself legally and emotionally, and refuse to let their lies define who you are or what you're capable of achieving. If this story resonated with you on any level, if it touched something deep in your heart or made you think about your own experiences with betrayal and resilience and the complexity of family relationships, please leave a like on this video. It truly helps us share these powerful real-life stories with more people who need to hear them and feel less alone in their struggles. Your engagement makes a real difference in spreading messages of truth and strength to others who are struggling with similar situations. And if you want to hear more stories like this, raw, honest, emotional journeys about overcoming life's hardest challenges and coming out transformed on the other side, make sure you subscribe to my Truth Revealed Tales. We share real experiences from real people who've been through the fire and emerged stronger, wiser, and more resilient. Hit that notification bell so you never miss a new story. Because trust me, you'll want to be here for what's coming next. We're building a community of people who value truth over comfortable lies, resilience over victimhood, and the courage to share our most difficult moments so that others don't feel alone in theirs. Thank you for listening to my story with an open heart. Thank you for being part of this journey and this community. And remember, the people who try to dim your light do so because they're afraid of your brightness and what it reveals about their own darkness. Keep shining anyway. Keep building anyway. Keep succeeding anyway despite their jealousy and sabotage. Your truth is more powerful than their lies. Your resilience is stronger than their betrayal. And your future is brighter than anything they tried to steal from you. Never forget that. Never let anyone make you smaller to accommodate their insecurities. You deserve every success you earn, and no one has the right to take that from you.